YouTuber in question and his guest, Mary Harrington. The YouTubers, Paul Kingsnorth and I, cross swords with him on Substack, and with the exchange ending, I think, around the point when he told me to go to church. Those of you who know what I do will have some idea that I questioned the Trinity and pointed out the idolatry and blasphemy of Christianity, and so he basically told me to go to church, which is, of course, a very condescending, high-handed, and unenlightening exchange, considering, he's this intellectual who, what's he done? He's written novels, he's gone to Oxford. What did he? I think he read history, and he was editor of The Independent or something. Anyway, he found God, and he wasn't even Christian. And his Indian wife had a premonition or something, and then he did indeed meet Jesus. And so he's now Christian and talks about it all the time. I think he's converted to Orthodox Christianity. He's one of those people. Now, there is a contingent of white, middle-class, British intellectuals who think going over to Orthodoxy is the clever and cool thing. And being intellectuals, they are able to talk at great length, pretentiously, incomprehensibly about their decisions. How does it relate to me? I focus on a word that they used, theologian, and posted something in the comments, and I got a response to that. And obviously I had to find out what I was talking about. It was a few days ago. I can't remember everything. But having had to rewind, so to speak, to get an idea of what the subject in question was about before it came up to my favourite word of theologian, I find the conversation incomprehensible. But I will now be subjecting you to this because I just think it's important for you to understand how pretentious and incomprehensible and incoherent all these discussions are, and of course draw attention to how I am a massive improvement. So here goes. This is the introduction. I hope the sound is okay.
Pagan. You constantly hear this notion that we're repaganizing, and I see where that comes from, but we're not repaganizing because pagans also had a clear sense of what they...
I'm sorry. I should have put the playback speed or normal instead of double, which is how I usually listen to things.
Believed in, and they had a clear sense of the divine, and we don't have anything. And actually, what we've got now is what you get when you're still fundamentally a Christian society, but you do not have Christ, you do not have God, you do not have a belief in anything beyond the material. You end up trying to create the forms here. You're trying to build the world. You try to build heaven here because you don't, and it's not even a conscious process. It's just.
If only we had some word for a basically Christian moral system that rejects everything except power and individuality.
What would that word be? And where would it be leading us? Where would it be leading
I can't possibly think.
I don't know. I think somebody needs to do some research into this, Mary.
It's a real head scratcher. We need a theologian.
It is, isn't it? I'm sure no one's ever come up with this idea before.
No.
So, I mean, so we're jumping into metaphysical territory, and it's funny how it always leads you there. It just leads you there. You can't talk about these things at any depth without actually.
But you can't. You can't poke at science and technology without realizing very swiftly. If you take it seriously and you take seriously what it's trying to achieve, you can't poke at that stuff without finding yourself very quickly in spiritual territory. Yeah, I mean, because what else? If we're talking about the ontology of
enough. So it just goes from one sentence to the next. Ontology, Gnosticism, and on and on and on. And they don't question each other. They're polite to each other. They pretend to laugh at each other's jokes. And I'm sure at the end of the conversation, if I were there and asked them what they were really talking about, I'm sure neither of them could tell me. They just kind of sang meaningless words that people who fancy themselves to be intellectuals would recognize as such. But in the end, it was meaningless. But what I focused on was they needed a theologian to tell them what the hell they were on about. And from what I could make out of what they were saying they need much more than what they have now. What do we have now? What is officially our political orthodoxy? Ask AI. I did. And AI couldn't tell me. What is our political orthodoxy? It's just shit made up by Congress and Parliament. Right? This is the reality of our moral condition in the West. Now, in China, the Chinese government actually respects their people enough to say, hey, Chinese people, our official orthodoxy is socialism with Chinese characteristics. And presidents of China will write papers talking about Mao Zedong thought on communism or socialism with Chinese characteristics. So every Chinese president who makes it to president, has to write his very learned and academic thoughts on what he thinks it means for him, the people, the time, what he knows of communism, blah, blah, blah. And I imagine it makes some kind of sense. I wonder if it's translated into English, because I wouldn't mind having a look. But anyway, I'm saying the Chinese in China under communism take their ideas more seriously than Westerners do. Now, yesterday I was at Speaker's Corner and I spoke to an ex-Catholic Sufi Muslim. It was raining, but the conversations were actually quite good, quite I was going to say intellectual, and I hated the word really, because I didn't want anybody to think that I was in any way talking to anybody the way Paul Kingsnorth and Mary Harrington were. Ontology just really triggers me. That's a word that is fundamentally meaningless, that people who did do philosophy will be trotting out just to show off to people. And then they'll be talking about epistemology, like they even know the difference between the two. And in case you're interested, ontology is a study of knowledge, and epistemology is a study of how we think we know things. And none of that matters, because we only think we know things, but we don't really, which is why fundamentally it is said that Agnosticism is the most intellectually respectable position to take on the existence of God. We can tell that Mary Harrington and Paul Kingsnorth were talking about God and the lack of belief in God in 21st century Britain. And it's not good. So what are they proposing? So you will hear, if you can bear to listen to it all the way through, they talk about Gnosticism and immanentizing the eschaton and, just stupid stuff like that. They never bother to explain for the benefit of any listener, because perhaps a listener doesn't really care. They just want to see Paul Kingsnorth and Mary Harrington using these words in this meaningless exchange to feel that they have had a white middle class education and vaguely know what these words mean in their undergraduate memories. And they feel uneasy about the way things are going. So what are they saying? They're saying they want this thing that is better than Christianity, or what is supposed to be Christianity, and the nonsense that we are supposed to repeat and believe. And what is really annoying is that people don't seem to get it. I really don't think I can get it reduced to anything more simpler than what I've already tried to do. So basically, Mary and Paul are wanting to continue with their idolatry. They want to think that they are superior to everyone else that they hate. They think people who believe in God are stupid. But the vaguely interesting thing about this exchange is that Mary still considers herself a feminist, and Paul is now an Orthodox Christian. But because they're both middle class, they can talk to each other in this sort of intellectual way that shows that they are civilized members of the British middle class, but their exchange means nothing. Now, why do I keep going on about it if I claim that their exchange is both pretentious and incoherent? Because whatever their faults, they're trying to express something that they feel to be true, and Mary seems to be shifting from feminism into something more meaningful because she has seen the harm that feminism does. So, but she is still clinging to feminism. Paul Kingsnorth shifted to Orthodox Christianity, presumably because he thought it's more exotic than the kind of Christianity he's used to as an Anglican, because people like him would be Anglicans. But the trouble is, they're all incoherent. Mary Harrington is an atheist. And therefore, whether she knows it or not, she only worships her own opinions. Who else are you supposed to worship if you're an atheist? You worship your own preferences, the people you like. And if something came up that you didn't like, you'll probably speak against it unfairly, because the idea that you don't like, or the person that you don't like, threatens your sacred belief system. Do not make the mistake. Do not make the mistake of thinking that atheists have no sense of sanctity. There are many things that they feel are sacred. Their childhoods, their beliefs, their sincerely held opinions. Those things are sacred to them. I'm not saying all atheists are dishonest people. After all, I was once an atheist. I like to think that I was the better kind of atheist because I was prepared to change my ideas when my beliefs changed, and I was prepared to change my beliefs when new facts came to light, or after I discovered that things that I thought were true were not, in fact, true. If you have the patience, you can go back and try and work out what Mary Harrington and Paul Kingsnorth were saying. You can actually go to the original video and you can click on the transcript and read the words in order to follow the conversation. But I doubt that it will make more sense than what I'm trying to tell you now. So what they were saying was that, I think it was Mary in particular, she said that if we don't believe in God, all we have is the present, the now, and the here, and the concrete and the material, making us narrower thinkers because we don't conceive of ideas such as posterity and justice and truth, and it's only going to be what's going to help me now in this life. And she discussed progressive ideologies. I don't know, I can't remember, but she said it in specific terms, but she was saying these ideologies are about getting to heaven in this life on earth. And as such, it must be narrower than the idea of another realm. But what if this heaven and hell thing doesn't really exist? My answer is that it doesn't really have to exist to be useful to us, because those who believe in refraining from doing the things that they were told not to do by God benefit their society by refraining to tell lies, slander their opponents, believe in nonsense, and not exercise logic. So basically, what I'm quarrelling with them is their way of expressing ideas in their convoluted language, perhaps without even wanting to be understood in case they get into trouble. The only reason why philosophers, European philosophers in particular, write the way they do is because they probably didn't want to be understood in case they got into trouble and were cancelled. But the problem with a European is that he hasn't really had a religion that he really believed in for centuries, if ever. Because before Christianity it was paganism, and who knows how many pagans really believed in the actual existence of the Nordic or the Greek pantheons. And so these people have no convictions. And this means they must be always at sea in fear of being cancelled or shot in the throat or whatever. Mind you, there have been Christian martyrs But were they really martyrs, or people who found themselves accused of heresy? I have a theory about those people who were burnt as heretics, which was a very Christian practice of the time. I think they must have been warned a few times told to shut up about the Trinity if they knew what's good for them. But I suppose some of them might have been driven so mad by curiosity that they were prepared to be burnt at the stake because they wanted to know the answer to whether belief in the Trinity is in fact idolatry, and whether idolatry is thought crime. So, to be charitable, I think Mary Harrington and Paul Kingsnorth were trying to express their distress and anxiety and discomfort at the idea of being told to believe in nonsense by a succession of governments who told lies and believed in nonsense. What is nonsensical is, well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to believe that Jesus created the universe. It doesn't make sense to claim that you are correctly worshipping God when in fact you worship an executed blasphemer. And if God exists, then punishment would follow if you do the things he specifically and expressly forbade. So I think I know the answer, but then I am not allowed to engage with sane and educated people. Perhaps there are none to engage with, other than those who, well, if they agree with me, they are too afraid to agree with me. So where is their courage? Where are their principles? What is their truth? Nowhere.